Senator Kaine.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and to Mr. Blinken, congratulations on the nomination. You're very well qualified for the position. Let me begin with something that I think is really important. The Secretary of State, by longstanding norm, not law, has been one of the least political of the cabinet secretaries. Generally, the Attorney General, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Defense do not engage in partisan political activity. And that pretty much goes back decades and decades. Your successor pretty much broke that practice in some fairly significant ways. Your predecessor has an Office of the Legal Advisor. The Office of the Legal Advisor gave wise advice to all in state and elsewhere. In a December 2019 memo, the legal advisor reminded all political appointees that they were, quote, they were prohibited from, quote, engaging in political activity in concert with a partisan candidate, political party, or partisan political group, and specifically indicated that, quote, Senate-confirmed presidential appointees may not even attend a political party convention or a convention-related event. Your predecessor stressed that in a cable to State Department employees in December. Quote, it is important that the department's employees do not improperly engage the Department of State in the political process and that they adhere to the Hatch Act and department policies in their own political activities. Despite that, your predecessor appeared and gave a campaign speech at the Republican National Convention, violating policy that he and the legal advisor had laid clearly down. I want to ask you about the words of another Secretary of State, Colin Powell, who said, as Secretary of State, I'm obliged not to participate in any way, shape, fashion, or form in parochial political debates. I have to take no sides in the matter. He said in 2004 when he skipped the Republican National Convention. Will you follow the Powell practice that has been the practice of the State Department and the Secretary of State for decades, or will you follow the Pompeo practice and turn the Secretary of State into a partisan political position?
I strongly agree with Secretary Powell, and that is the model I would follow.
I will be extremely disappointed if I see you showing up at partisan events for Democrats, including the president and vice president, the president who's appointed you. If I see you doing campaign events for anybody on my side of the aisle, I will be very disappointed. And I know you're not going to, but I wanted to put that on the record.
And I would welcome you holding me to that. I have to tell you, Senator, I could not agree more strongly that with regard to the State Department, it has to be, and if I have anything to say about it, it will be a nonpartisan institution that is seeking only to advance the national interest. And I might add, I started my career in Washington at the department in 1993. And I've been working with the men and women of the Foreign Service, the Civil Service, for the better part of 25 years. And I could not begin to tell you for 9 out of 10, or maybe even 10 of 10, if the person's a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or what. They are simply professionals who are working to advance the national interest. And if the person who purports to lead them is not doing the same thing, I think we've got a problem.
Let me ask a related question. The norm over time in the State Department for ambassadors has been that about 70% are career and 30% are political. There's nothing magic about that number, but administrations, both Democratic and Republican, have generally sort of adhered to that ratio. The Trump administration changed that ratio pretty significantly. It was about 55% career and 45% political, 50% higher in terms of the political appointees than the norm. As you have had dialogue with President-elect Biden about his thoughts about the State Department, do you think you'll see us go back to the norm? The political appointees are often very, very important. I get it, and that's why the 30% is important. But do you think we'll go back to a norm and see that 2 to 1 or 70 to 30 as a more likely path forward?
Yes, I do.
Thank you for that. I am very worried. There's been questions about issues in the Western Hemisphere, and I'm worried that we just pay attention to the Western Hemisphere when there's a crisis. If there's a caravan, we're going to be paying attention to it. Or significant drug trade from Colombia, we're going to pay attention to it. But then we sort of lose attention, and we tend to look at the world as if it has an east-west axis and not a north-south axis. President-elect Biden, I think, starts with some real goodwill in the region because when he was vice president, he did spend significant time working with our State Department and other professionals to sort of build relations in the Americas. I still think there's just tremendous upside in this. It's hard for a U.S. of 330 million to sort of match up all the time with nations like China with 1 billion people. But the Americas, from Tierra del Fuego to Patagonia, Tierra del Fuego to the Yukon, would have about 1 billion. So the more we can do in tandem with other nations in the Americas, the more we can advance our own economic and security interests. I don't think we should do it just because China and Russia and Iran are getting involved in the region, but that should make us worry. Talk to me a little bit about your big picture perspective and that of the Biden administration on sort of an all Americas policy or focus on our own backyard.
Thank you for raising that. You know, you're right. This has actually been an area of focus for the president-elect. I went back and counted not so long ago, and I think he made 16 trips to countries in our hemisphere as vice president. And even before that, when he was a member of this committee, he was very focused on a number of issues in the hemisphere, starting with Colombia, Plan Colombia, and what followed. And then as vice president, a real focus on Mexico, on the Northern Triangle countries, and for that matter, issues throughout the hemisphere. And he has a strongly held view that we have a strong national interest in doing what we can to advance the future for our hemisphere that is democratic, that is middle class, that is secure. And there is a lot that we can and should be doing as partners with countries throughout the hemisphere to advance that vision. So in terms of the way we're resourced, in terms of the way we're focused, I feel confident that this is going to get sustained attention, not what you rightly described as sort of piecemeal attention. Yeah, episodic.
I look forward to working with you on that. Let me ask you a question about Israel-Palestine, which has come up already. The two-state solution. This has been U.S. policy since Truman, in one way or another, certainly since the Oslo Accords. And yet sometimes I feel like our policy is to say two-state solution is our policy, but it has been hard for us to find meaningful path forward. I paid my first visit to Israel in 1998. I've been to Israel more times than I've been to Ireland, and I have relatives in Ireland. I really value the U.S.-Israel relationship, but the prospects for a peaceful Israel and Palestine existing side by side are worse today than they were in 1998 when I first visited, and I find that tragic. Yeah. And what's the challenge of not having a meaningful two-state solution? Let's just talk about COVID. There's a vaccination campaign going on right now that in Israel is viewed as one of the leading and most innovative in the world in terms of vaccinating high percentages of people, but virtually no one in Palestine has been vaccinated. And the Israeli health minister says when we are done with our citizens, then we will focus attention on our neighbors. So the Palestinians are in this odd space where they're sort of they don't have their own country, they're in a country, but they're not considered citizens, they're considered neighbors. This is the kind of thing that suggests we really do need to find a path forward. I do believe the Trump administration's success in the Abrahamic Accords is notable, and I applauded it right out of the gate. How might we use the improved relations between nations in the Arab world with Israel to help advance the prospect, finally, since the late 1940s, the prospect of a two-state solution?
Well, first of all, I very much share the premise of your comment and question, which is, as I see it, the two-state solution, however distant it may appear, is still the best and probably the only way to truly assure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state, and of course to give the Palestinians the state to which they are entitled. The challenge, of course, is how to move forward on that at a time when you rightly said, seems more distant than it's ever been, at least since Oslo. I hope that the progress that was made with the Abraham Accords, which I applaud, the steps that countries are taking to normalize relations with Israel is an extremely positive development, and one that we would hope to build on if given the opportunity. I hope that also might create a greater sense of confidence and security in Israel as it considers its relationship with the Palestinians, because whether we like it or not, whether they like it or not, it's not just going away.
And these nations that have now normalized relations can play an important role in both economic support for Palestinians, but also providing security assistance. And they may be more willing to do that now that they've normalized relations in this way. Well, Mr. Blinken, thank you. My time is up. I do want to work with you and State Department on issues about war powers, the cleaning up of the various authorizations from 1991 and 2001 and 2002 that are still floating out in space with no time or geographic limit. I'll look forward to working with the State Department and the White House on those.
I would welcome that.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kaine. Appreciate that.